You weren't even mentioned in the will, sir. The lawyer's voice wasn't cruel. It was practiced, smooth, even sympathetic, but that made it worse. I remember that moment like a slap without sound. No thunder, no fury. Just silence, and the slow collapse of something inside me that had been standing for decades. I'm 70 now. My name's Roy Campbell, born and raised in Victoria County, Texas. A retired mechanic, churchgoer, and widower for 5 years now. I buried my wife, Elaine, in the spring of 2020, right as the world shut down from COVID and grief came with masks and empty pews. I stood 6 feet from my grandchildren as the dirt fell on the only woman I ever loved. At least, I thought I loved her. We were married 44 years. Through money trouble, health scares, the kids growing up, the good Sundays and the ugly Tuesdays. We weathered it all, or so I thought. I thought love meant survival. I thought loyalty was something we'd already proven 1,000 times over. I thought she was mine. But 5 years after her passing, when her final estate documents were unsealed, something I'd never rushed. Something I never expected, I found out I was wrong. I wasn't hers, not really, not where it counted. The lawyer handed me a manila folder. The property deed has been transferred to Mr. Carl Whitaker. He was listed as the primary beneficiary, along with, he paused. Along with? I asked. My voice was too steady. That's the thing about growing old. You get real good at hiding earthquakes in your chest. Along with a Mr. Jonah Whitaker. Her son. I blinked. She never had a son named Jonah. She did, but he was born before she met you, Mr. Campbell. It's listed clearly here. Birth certificate, trust documentation. He's her biological child, born in 1973. Father, Carl Whitaker. Former spouse. I reached out and took the papers with hands I didn't recognize as my own. They trembled, like rusted gears forced back into motion. Elaine never told me, never hinted, never slipped up in all those decades. I didn't even know she had been married before me. How does a man spend 44 years beside a woman and still not know what corner of her heart he was living in? I drove home that day with the AC off and the windows down, hoping the warm Texas wind would blow the truth off me. But it stuck. It clung to my skin, to the wheel, to the air around me. I was breathing betrayal. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. I stepped inside and looked around like a guest. Everything looked the same. The yellowed photo of our wedding day on the mantle, the quilt she'd made from her old college t-shirts, the kitchen that still held her scent on the spice rack, but it all meant something different now. She was a woman with a secret life, and I had been her second draft. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the will until the light outside disappeared and the cicadas began their nightly chorus. Then I read it again. It wasn't just the house. It was everything. The savings account, the lake property in Marble Falls I didn't even know she still owned, the old Mustang in the garage we'd planned to restore someday. All of it, left to Carl and Jonah Whitaker. Not even a mention of me. Not a thank you, not a goodbye, not even a damn trinket. It took me a long time to cry. Maybe 2 full days. Grief's like a slow faucet when you're a man of my age and pride. But when the tears came, they came hard. And not just for what I'd lost, but for what I'd never truly had. I realized then that I had built my life on a story she wrote, and never let me read the whole thing. That night, I stood in our bedroom, no, her bedroom now, and opened the cedar chest at the foot of the bed. It was locked. Of course it was. She used to smile and call it her memory box. I never asked what was in it. I figured if she wanted me to know, she'd tell me. I should have known better. Now I wanted to know everything. And I would find out, even if the truth rotted my bones. I took the chest to the garage the next morning. I didn't sleep much that night, just sat in the kitchen with a cup of stale coffee, staring out at the dew forming on the grass, wondering how many years of my life had been spent loving a woman who never fully let me in. The lock on the cedar chest wasn't hard to break. I used a flathead screwdriver and a bit of patience. It popped with a sound that startled me more than it should have, like it had been guarding her truth for too long and didn't want to let go. Inside, everything smelled like her. Lavender, old wood. The scent hit me so hard my knees buckled. I steadied myself against the workbench and just stood there for a moment. Then I looked inside. There were letters, dozens of them, bound together with twine. Yellowed envelopes, worn at the corners, with handwriting I didn't recognize. The return address on the first one read, Carl Whitaker, Abilene, Texas. That name again. I opened the first letter and started to read. The handwriting was rough, masculine, but tender. In that first note, he wrote, "Elaine, I still remember the curve of your smile the day we said goodbye." It wasn't final, I knew that then. No matter where life takes us, you'll always be the what if that haunts me. I kept reading, letter after letter, year after year. They never stopped, even after we married, even after the children, even after the surgeries and the holidays and the quiet mornings when I'd make her toast just the way she liked it, burnt with strawberry jam. He never stopped writing, and she never stopped keeping them. She never wrote back, not that I could tell, but she kept every letter. And not just kept them, protected them. Stored in cedar, wrapped in silk, hidden from me, from us, from the life we supposedly built together. I found photos next, old Polaroids, curling at the corners. One of her on a beach I'd never been to. Another of her holding a boy, a toddler, with eyes too much like hers. On the back, in faded ink, Jonah, 1974. First steps, that was the name the lawyer had said. Her son, not ours. Not mine. I felt something inside me fall in on itself. Not anger, at least not yet. Not even betrayal, really. Just the crushing sense of being erased from my own life. I sat in the garage for hours, holding those photos, that truth, like it might dissolve if I gripped it hard enough. Elaine had a past, sure, we all do. But this wasn't a past, this was a parallel life. A hidden room in the house of our marriage I'd never been allowed to open. Why? That was the question that roared in my head louder than anything else. Why didn't she tell me? Was she ashamed of Jonah? Of Carl? Or was I just never the man she wanted enough to trust with it? I remembered her quiet moments then, how she'd look out the window at sunset sometimes with this far-off look. Like she was waiting for someone who never came. I thought it was just the sadness of aging. Turns out, it was remembering someone who had come and gone long before me, and who never really left. That night, I poured myself a glass of whiskey. Not the cheap stuff, the good bottle, the one I'd been saving for a special occasion. Well, what occasion could be more special than realizing your entire marriage was built on a secret? I didn't tell anyone, not yet, not our kids, not the neighbors, not Pastor Grady from church, who still checks in on me every few weeks. I needed time to understand it, to feel the full weight of it. But I also knew this, I couldn't go back to living like nothing had changed. Because everything had, and for the first time in my life, I was going to start asking questions, loudly, if I had to. Because Elaine may be gone, but her secrets weren't, and I wasn't going to let her ghost keep them from me any longer. After a few days, I couldn't stand being in that house. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a whisper. Every photograph on the wall, every pair of her slippers tucked neatly under the bed, it all stared back at me, daring me to ask what was real and what was just performance. I went out back, sat on the porch swing we built together in '85. Well, I built it, she picked the paint, and I stared at the barn until dusk. That barn saw everything, the years when our boys were little, the Christmases with snow so thick we had to dig the truck out, the summer we almost lost the cornfield to fire. It also saw how she cried alone, sometimes. How she sat out here after dark long after I'd gone to bed. I used to think she was just thinking about the kids. Now I wonder if she was writing letters in her head, to him. Carl Whitaker, the name felt like ash in my mouth now. I'd looked him up, quietly, through an old friend at the county clerk's office. Turns out he never remarried. Never moved too far from Abilene. A mechanic, retired now. Still alive, still around. It hit me then, he was probably at the funeral. Maybe he was even in the back row of the church, watching me sob over her casket, watching me say goodbye to a woman who never fully belonged to me. Hell, he probably grieved her in ways I never could understand, because he never had her, and maybe that made every moment he remembered even more precious. I felt small, and humiliated, and then I started feeling something else I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Anger, not the kind that shouts, not the kind that punches walls or throws things. No, this kind was colder, older, like rusted metal that still slices clean when it wants to. She used me, or maybe I used myself. Maybe I was the fool who wanted a family so badly that I never questioned why her love felt just out of reach. I thought back to our first years. We struggled, sure, but I loved her in a way that made me think I was the luckiest man in Eastland County. I gave her my first real paycheck. I built her garden beds and let her pick every movie on Friday nights. I held her hand when her mother passed and laid on the floor with her for 3 days when she had her first miscarriage. And still, it wasn't enough to earn the whole truth. Jonah, the boy in the photo. I looked him up, too. He's 51 now, lives in Austin, teaches high school English, married, 2 kids. Not once had she ever spoken his name in my presence. Never even hinted. And now he had everything. Her house, her car, the lakefront cabin I saved for a decade to buy her. All transferred legally, months before her death. The lawyer told me she came in alone. Said she wanted everything to go to Jonah. Said she didn't want the husband to feel burdened with more responsibility. Burdened, as if grieving wasn't enough. As if growing old without her was easy. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling and replayed every conversation we ever had in my mind like a scratched up old tape. Where were the clues? What did I miss? The truth is, I missed it because I didn't want to see it. That's the hardest part. I chose not to see it. I wanted peace, stability, a family I could come home to. I gave up promotions so I could be home by dinner. I skipped fishing trips with friends so I could be around for the kids. I smiled through my own disappointments just so she'd never feel alone. But I see now, I was the one who was alone. For 48 years, and as that truth sunk in, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. Elaine may have taken everything she had, but she didn't take everything I have. Not yet. The morning after I made that promise to myself, I found the will again. I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where she used to slice peaches for cobbler in late July, and laid out every page. I read every line like it was a confession. It was all there, the notarized date 6 months before she passed, the careful wording, the designated beneficiaries. Jonah, Carl Whitaker, me. I was left a letter. Not a goodbye, not a thank you, a letter. It was sealed in a pale blue envelope and tucked into the folder, like some kind of afterthought. Like she didn't want to say the words aloud. It began, "James, please know this isn't about love. It's about the past, and trying to make peace with it." I stopped reading right there. Because if it wasn't about love, then what was I doing here all these years? I set the letter down. I didn't burn it, I didn't rip it, I just left it there, right next to my cup of coffee. Let it curl up in the morning light, useless and heavy. That week, I saw my lawyer. Not the family guy who helped us with our wills. Someone new, someone I'd met through a veteran friend over at the Legion Hall. Quiet man, direct, the kind who listens more than he talks. "Mr. Wallace," he said after reading everything I brought him. "Legally, she was allowed to do this. You two had separate assets. Anything titled in her name only was fair game. If you didn't co-sign, she didn't need permission." "I know," I said quietly. "But," he continued, "you still have options." That word stirred something in me, options. After months of grieving, of feeling hollow and invisible, the idea that I still had agency, still had some control over anything, lit a small, cold fire in my chest. He walked me through it. The land I inherited from my parents was still in my name. 37 acres outside Cisco. She'd always said she had no interest in it. It was too dry, she used to say. I had let it sit, but I never sold it. I could sell it now. Not for revenge, not to make a point, but to move forward. I also had a military pension. Not much, but enough if I added in my savings. And there was one thing I'd always wanted to do, build something with my hands one more time. A place that was mine. Fully mine. No ghosts. No shared closets. No photographs that lied. I started sketching that afternoon. A small cabin, just 2 rooms. A front porch that faced the sunrise. Maybe a garden if my knees held up. And a dog. Yeah, I'd get a dog. Every nail, every board, I'd choose it. I'd lift it, I'd know it, and I wouldn't hang her picture on the wall. In fact, I packed them all. Every frame, every smiling lie. I boxed them up and took them down to the Goodwill. Some clerk looked at me funny when she saw the wedding portraits. "She was beautiful," the girl said. Yes, I nodded. She was. But beauty, I've learned, doesn't mean truth. And now, the truth was all I wanted. I didn't tell the kids. They had their own lives. One of them had already gently suggested I start looking into assisted living. Another sent me pamphlets in the mail with happy old people holding yoga mats. None of them knew a damn thing. None of them asked how I was really doing. Maybe they thought I was too old to make decisions. Too slow to rebuild. Let them think it. Let them underestimate me. I had 37 acres, a quiet lawyer, and the first set of building plans I'd drawn in 40 years. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a widower. I felt like a man again. I didn't tell anyone. No announcements. No long emails. No updates on Facebook. Hell, I never had one of those anyway. I just packed what I needed, loaded my old Ford, and left Fort Worth behind like a chapter I'd overread. The land out near Cisco hadn't changed much. It was still dry, still stubborn, still mine. The first week, I stayed in a borrowed camper on the edge of the property. I woke with the sun, made instant coffee, and sat in a lawn chair while dew clung to my boots. In the silence, I remembered who I used to be. Before the marriage, before the years blurred. It's strange how deeply life can press you into someone else's story. For decades, I thought I was building a life with her. But really, I was building one for her. Now, it was my turn. I hired a small crew, young men who called me sir even when I told them not to. I sketched every line of the cabin myself, then stood by as they followed it. I lifted what I could, hammered a few boards, and even laid the first plank of the porch with my own hands. The house went up in 6 weeks. It was simple, strong, not too big, not too proud. A kitchen, a reading corner, a back door that opened out into the scrubland. And in the bedroom, instead of a queen-size bed, I built a twin. Just enough. I bought a dog from a rescue shelter. An old hound mix with cloudy eyes and a limp. They said he was 12, maybe 13. Too old for most folks to take. But I looked him in the eye and said, "Me too, partner." I named him Whiskey. He followed me everywhere, his ears flopping, his nose always in the wind. When I told the kids I'd moved out to the land, they were confused. "Why didn't you tell us, Dad?" my son asked over the phone. "I didn't think you'd be interested," I replied. "You were too busy sending me brochures for retirement homes." He went quiet. I didn't need an apology. I just needed space. I let the will sit. I never contested it, never tried to fight Jonah or Carl for anything. Let them have the antique jewelry. Let them sell the house. Let them take the money and sip cocktails by the Gulf. I didn't want a dime of what was never meant for me. But I did contact the bank about one thing. Unbeknownst to my wife, I'd opened a separate savings account in my name only, years ago, using a small inheritance from my uncle. I'd never touched it, never mentioned it. It wasn't much, but it helped me buy lumber, pay the boys, and keep food in Whiskey's bowl. That money was mine. My story began again on that land. No ghosts, no lies, just fresh wood, morning light, and the breath of a dog at my feet. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking at the sky and asking questions. Not to God, to her. Was it worth it, Ellen? No reply ever came, just whined through the mesquite trees. One afternoon in late October, a letter arrived from Carl Whitaker. Typed, of course, probably on the same smug little laptop he always carried. "James, I know things were complicated between us. Ellen cared for you deeply. I hope you understand that. If you ever want to talk." I stopped reading there, folded it, tossed it into the fire pit, and lit a match. Let him talk to the ashes. I had no desire to yell, no need to seek revenge. I had what I needed, a place to sleep, a dog that listened, and the dignity of walking away without begging for the truth. The town of Cisco was small enough that people didn't ask too many questions. Folks waved from tractors. The girl at the feed store remembered my name by the third visit. And no one cared that I was 70 years old building a life from scratch with arthritic hands and a hound dog who snored like thunder. I liked it that way. But word travels, especially when there's money involved. One morning, I got a call from a local attorney. Young guy named Sutton whose father used to run cattle with my uncle. He spoke slowly, respectfully. "Mr. Wallace, I don't want to alarm you, but Carl Whitaker and Jonah Simmons are both trying to access one of your former investment accounts. There seems to be some misunderstanding about power of attorney." I smiled to myself. I had expected this. I thanked Sutton, then faxed over the updated legal documents I'd filed 6 weeks ago. Everything Ellen had left to them was legal and untouched. But my assets, the land I'd inherited before our marriage, the account I'd kept separate, the modest but steady pension I'd rerouted to a different institution, were protected. I'd drawn the line. They hadn't expected me to have any fight left. That was their mistake. Carl tried to call 3 times. I let each one ring. He finally sent a letter. handwritten this time, as if ink could soften betrayal. I'm sorry you feel the way you do. Ellen and I had a complicated past, but I never tried to replace you. That line, it burned. He never had to replace me. He was always there, in her memories, in the letters she never threw out, in the corner of her smile when she thought no one was looking. But I didn't reply. The next envelope came from Jonah. He sounded more panicked. James, I didn't know what Mom had done. I was as surprised as you. We don't have to let this tear the family apart. But we already had, a long time ago. Only now, I finally saw it. I didn't yell. I didn't write back. I simply had Sutton send them a formal letter stating that I had severed all financial and legal ties. No inheritance. No name on my deeds. No more phone calls. There's no revenge quite like indifference. That December, they tried one more time. They drove out to the land. I heard the car pull up just as I was chopping firewood. Whiskey barked once, then settled down beside me. I didn't stop splitting logs. I didn't walk over. They waited in the car for 10 minutes, watching me from behind the windshield. Then they drove away. I never saw them again. But I know they saw me. Alive, solid, still standing, no begging, no pleading, just a man in the winter of his life, who refused to die quietly in someone else's lie. The house behind me was built with my hands. The firewood stacked by the door was chopped with my strength. The name on the deed was mine, no one else's. And in that moment, I knew. I wasn't the shadow, I was the one who walked out of it. It's been almost a year since that winter morning when they came out to the ranch and left without saying a word. I never told them that I watched from the window after I went inside, that I saw Carl linger at the edge of the gravel road, his hands trembling as he reached for the gate, but never opened it. I suppose there's still some kind of pain in him. Guilt, maybe, or shame, or simply the weight of years catching up to him. But I wasn't waiting for that anymore. The air in Cisco is dry and clean, and when the sun rises over the hills, it spills gold across the front porch where I drink my coffee each morning. My hands are slower now, my back stiff. But there is something to be said for a quiet life earned after a storm. I fixed up the barn, planted a vegetable garden, took in an old rescue dog from the shelter who was half blind and walked with a limp. We understood each other right away. Every now and then, a neighbor stops by. They know bits and pieces. Some think I'm a widower with no children. Some think I moved out here to escape city life. None of them ask too much, and I like it that way. Sometimes at night, I sit on the porch and look out across the pasture and think of Ellen. I loved her once. God knows I did, and maybe in some strange way, she loved me too, just not more than she loved her own secrets. I've stopped asking why, not because it doesn't matter, but because I finally understand something. The truth doesn't always come wrapped in clarity. Sometimes, it shows up in bits, shards of glass that cut you on the way out, but once they're gone, you can breathe again. I forgave her in my own way, not with words or ceremony, but by letting her go, by letting them go. But don't mistake my peace for weakness. I may be old, I may be alone, but I am not broken. I signed no letters, I sent no apologies. I simply reclaimed what was mine and walked away, head high, hands steady. There is a kind of quiet revenge in living well. And to anyone listening, any man sitting in silence, swallowing shame that isn't his, dimming himself to make room for others. You are not forgotten, you are not weak for having loved. But you do not have to stay in the shadows. The world may tell you that you're just an old man, too late to start again. I'm here to tell you, it's never too late to take your name back. Even if you have to carve it into the land yourself. James Wallace, Cisco, Texas.